Kia ora koutou. Nice to see so many people joining us today. We're expecting maybe a few more people to come along, but we'll get started as it's just turned 3:30 for our webinar today, looking at digital tools for collaboration with Monika. So I'll start with a karakia and then I'll introduce Monika and what she's going to talk about today. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. So, welcome. And I'm sure a lot of you already know Monika, but for those of you who might be new to our wonderful Monika, originally from Germany, she's now settled in the far north, and she has been the education manager at the Waitangi Treaty Grounds, and until recently was co-chair of Tipu Tiaki Mana Taonga. And now she's working alongside Mel and myself in the team to support sector capability as a learning specialist. So I'm delighted to have her as our speaker today. And she's going to be talking to us about collaborating online. So firstly, she'll start by considering what the purpose of collaboration is, and then she'll give us a sort of smorgasbord of different digital tools that we might be able to use to support collaboration, whether that's with our peers or our colleagues or teachers or students. So she's going to introduce us to lots of different tools. We'll actually get to play with some of the tools today and experiment with using them. And her slides have already been uploaded to our website, so you can go back to them afterwards and refer to them if you see a digital tool you'd like to experiment with more. You can refer back to them, and there'll be a recording of the session on our YouTube channel and on the website with guest speakers' identities blurred. We'll just see Monika and her slides. So I'm very excited for this webinar. If you've got any questions, Monika's really keen to hear from you. So just pop them in the chat. If something comes up while she's probably the easiest way to ask a question is to write it in the chat, and Mel and I will be monitoring that for Monika, and we can pose to her either throughout or at the end. There'll be chance for questions as well. So over to you, Monika.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Welcome. Thanks for joining in today. There's still quite a few people coming in. I can hear them all bing in my headphones. So apologies if I pause at a funny moment, just because one of those bings is distracting me. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to join in and have a think about online collaboration. The very first thing I would like you to do is use the chat to put some ideas down why you think collaboration is important. There's many different ways of how we can collaborate, but why is it important? Of course, I've done a bit of research online beforehand, but I'm really keen to hear from you what you think. And I'm just bit by bit going to put some of those ideas down that I thought were important from what I saw online. One of the things I found online was that it improves problem solving. It is the whole idea of us sharing knowledge. Oh, wow, lots of comments coming in there. Yeah, different people doing different things differently, so we can cover more different problems. I'm actually going to bring up the chat. You guys can probably all see them pop up. That's really cool. I like this, the power of synergy. And, you know, it's all our heads coming together to solve problems. Ultimately, that's what we want to do with collaboration, isn't it? Solve a problem. We also want to learn about each other, and it's really cool what you can learn about each other as you're collaborating together. Drawing on people's strengths is a really biggie. Thanks for that, Grace. And it's also boosting knowledge by putting all our knowledge, all those different kiti together. Apparently, it improves productivity. Which is definitely something a lot of us are interested in. And Giving us a sense of purpose is another really cool side effect that I like about collaboration. But with all these big words that I put up there or found online, really what it comes back to is what the Maori Whakatauki has told us for a long time. He waka eke noa. We're all in this together. And only by paddling together, we get somewhere and we get there safely. So really cool to see that all our ideas here about collaboration can be brought together with an online tool, with the chat in there. Now let's run a quick little poll. And those of you that have been in the regional focus groups, you might have had done a poll before. Who do you collaborate with online? So if you can go down to the activity, which is the triangle, the square, and the circle, you should find a live poll that says, who do you collaborate with online? And you've got the choice of colleagues, teachers, learners, several of the above, or I don't collaborate online yet. So just put your answer down and you should be able to see the results as they're coming in. I can see there's a few people who say they're collaborating with colleagues. 4 of you have voted for several of the above. And some people don't collaborate online yet. That's absolutely fine. Just really interested to see what you come up with. Fantastic. That poll will keep on running. So keep on adding your answers to it as you find it. Remember, it's a little triangle, square, and circle down the bottom under activities. So I'm going to come back to my slides and going to take us over to look at different levels of this very important collaboration. Not every task needs the same level of collaboration, but you can see there's a bit of a bottom, a bit of a staircase there. We can collaborate with the purpose of communicating something. We can coordinate and cooperate, or we can collaboratively be creative, create something new. And I deliberately put them on the staircase because I feel that it is a higher level of collaboration where we create something together than when we just communicate. So I will refer back to this poema throughout the presentation with a little screenshot, and hopefully you will see how we can use those different tools to collaborate on those different levels. Now, when we talk about online collaboration, quite often you hear those words thrown around, synchronous and asynchronous. Just to make sure that we all understand the same by those words, synchronous is really about doing something at the same time. We can do this at the same time by being in the same space or using an online tool. And there's some really good reasons why we might want to do something synchronously. So we might want to get some immediate feedback from those people that are in the same space at the same time. And the contributors can discuss and elaborate on other people's contributions. But where you're limited is that only those people that are available to enter that space at that time can be part of it. That's where asynchronous comes in, not at the same time or at different times. You've got a real flexibility of who can contribute. They're not limited by being in the same space at the same time as you. And I don't know what you feel like, but sometimes you need a bit of time to think about making a really valuable contribution to your collaborative project. So that gives you the time to think about it. Make it a time when it's good for you. Maybe you're really good at thinking about these things at 10 o'clock at night and you can contribute then. While at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you might go like, nah, it's not quite happening. However, it can take longer to get a result. And that is, of course, the downside for asynchronous. If you want a quick snapshot, you want it from the people synchronously there and then. So let's just run another little poll. And that's our only 2 polls we're doing today. How do you collaborate online? So there's a second poll launched in your activities now. You've got a choice between synchronous, asynchronous, both, or neither. I've got a vote straight away for both. And asynchronous, both. Yeah, it's actually quite cool when you see those graphs move. I don't know if you can see the move at your end as well. And that's the cool thing about digital tools. They automate some of those processes, make them very visible. Really nice side effect for those of us that prefer to have a visual representation. Cool. So we've established there's really good reasons why we want to collaborate. There's different levels of collaboration. We've clarified what synchronous means and what asynchronous means. Let's have a look at how we can use tools to help us with that. Now, when we think about communication, that bottom level of our potamer there, the main modes of communication are nowadays text, audio, and video. It's really something that we have become really familiar with. I mean, we're all in a video call right now. Obviously, we know how to use video calls, and they have their advantages and their disadvantages. We all know about text. Emails is not many people write letters anymore, sadly. But email and any other text kind of communication is really common. Or audio, picking up the phone. Sometimes it is the easiest way to collaborate straight then and there. So whatever you want to collaborate on, however you want to communicate, identify the need you want to meet, and then select your tool. Don't make the tool the first decision. Have a think about it. Do I want to have a conversation with someone? Is that the easiest to just bring them on the phone? Do I need to see them at the same time? Or is it easier if I write it in an email really explicitly what I want to have from them? There's a whole heap of tools out there and quite a few multi-purpose tools. So the first thing I'm going to do is run through some of those multi-purpose tools so you can get a bit of an idea of where they fit in and why you might want to use them. At any time when you've got a question, just put it in the chat, and no doubt Helen or Mel will pop up and ask the question if I haven't seen it. So the very first of the multi-purpose tools that I want to talk about is Google Chat and Google Meet. You're right now in a Google Meet. Google Meet is a Google service. So if you've got a Gmail account or a Google Workspace, it used to be called Google Suite or Google something for education. I've forgotten. Google Suite for education. And that is all included, and it incorporates with your Gmail. It comes up on your Gmail. Now you can see this is something we use as a team here, the chat function. I'll put a screenshot of that in there, and you can just find some different spaces. So we've got a few different spaces, which is where we talk about certain topics. We straight away can start our meetings down the bottom or schedule them or have individual chats. Very simple tool, easy to use on Chromebooks, on mobile devices, on laptops, desktops. Integrates really well with all the Google things. So it's, a good multi-purpose tool that people might want to use in their daily work as they communicate with people. Another tool quite a few people are using is something that we used to use for Raranga Matehiko before, which is Slack. So Slack is a third-party program. It's free in most senses, and you can again set up some different topics, channels they call it here. We've got different channels up on there, direct messages, and you can have a conversation in there, share links, share images, all sorts of things. Really good way to communicate. You also have video calls in there if you want to speak to people, or just a voice call in there as well. Definitely something for you to try out. From there, we go to Microsoft Teams. A lot of organizations that use Office 365, they are starting to use Microsoft Teams. So that's a way of how you can communicate within your organization. Oh yeah, I can see Kiwi. Yeah, you use the Microsoft Chat, which is probably related to the Microsoft Teams. We use that at Tipapa as well with the Microsoft Teams because it's an Office 365 organization. So it is basically trying to put a whole heap of things that are relevant to a team together into one space. It works really well on laptop devices, pretty much on most devices. You might have to have an app for it. And it's really designed to communicate within an organization. So that could be within your local council that you're part of. In our case, within Tipapa, you can open it up to other people, but originally it was designed to keep your communication really safe. Now we're getting to Zoom, which is a tool many of us haven't used much before the last lockdown. There's free accounts, there's paid accounts. It's really widely used. Nowadays, it's become a verb, hasn't it? Let's Zoom, to have a conversation, no matter what tool we're using. And this is pretty good for the company if your tool becomes a verb. The one thing with Zoom is you don't have an option, or Zoes, Zoom Huis. You don't actually have an option to have a synchronous conversation in there. So you need to have the room open to communicate. You can't have the communication outside that room. So it's really interesting if that's what works for people. If they don't have the Google accounts or the Microsoft accounts in their organization, Zoom does a really great job allowing you to communicate with other people while that room is open. Now, here's a blast from the past. Remember Skype? We used to use Skype or everywhere, you know, it was the thing to do. And you can actually see on that screenshot my private Skype account, which I used to use for work as well. And that had the chats in there. You could have rooms in there. You did your video calls and everything. And I don't actually know why it's fallen by the wayside a bit. It's those other tools have really taken over, but it's still around. Now, I put that private Skype screenshot in there on purpose because I really want you to think about the tool you're choosing as you communicate with others. You want to choose a tool that best meets the needs of all parties involved. But you want to be mindful of confidentiality and privacy issues, especially if you work for an organization that has strict rules around that. And you want to also allow yourself and the other person to keep your work and your private life separate. Because we know a lot of us are working from home nowadays, so our work is really coming into our private life. So as you think about communication tools, think really carefully, what is the tool that I find will help me to achieve the confidentiality, the privacy my organization needs, and allow me to keep work and private life separate. All right, so these are the main communication tools. But what about back channels? Don't know if people are very familiar with the word back channel. It's the idea is that when you've got a webinar like right now, everybody else is muted except me, which is great for me because I can talk, but how can you have a conversation at the same time? Well, our obvious option is the chat, and we use that as a back channel a lot of the time. So what is a back channel? It's basically using computers or using the internet to have a conversation in real time while something else is going on. So might have a webinar, we've got the back channel going and the chat with your questions, with your comments, anything like that, links that Mel is sharing. You could have this during a conference. Basically, in any situation where you don't really have time to discuss your questions or discuss any of the points, a back channel is a really good idea. Now, apart from the chat we've got here with Google, there's a whole heap of other tools you can use. And one I really like using is this here. It's called Answer Garden. Now, we're going to have a quick play in this Answer Garden. So Answer Garden sits out of Google Meets. It's a different program. You can see the address on the bottom, and Mel is posting it in the chat. There's also a QR code here on the screen. So if you've got your phone right next to you, you can go and just with the camera scan that code and it takes you to the website. So I'm just holding my phone up here to demonstrate to you, and you can open it up on your phone or you can type in the code and get there on a different browser tab. Mel, we're all good? We've shared the link? Awesome, thank you. I'm going to quickly skip over to that other tab to show you what I can see on the other end. So Answer Garden is absolutely simple, really simple to set up. And I'll put a question there. What's the best thing about webinars? You could set up any question you like. Now you can use this with adults, with colleagues. You could use it with students in a virtual environment. And what you do is there's 40 characters where you can type your answer there. I'm going to say, what's the best thing about webinars? You can participate from anywhere. And I'm just going to click submit. And it's going to pop up on the screen. It's going to turn into a little word cloud. Yee-hee, I can see a whole lot of your answers in there already. Now, what you will notice is it doesn't automatically refresh necessarily. I love that comment, not needing to show up. And I like it so much that I'm actually going to copy that comment and see what happens here. I hover over it, I get a number 1. I click on it, and I have got the words up there in my bar, and I'm going to submit it. Now, next time, fantastic, we've got an arrow. Let's just see if I can get back to it. All right, so next time, now we see the word cloud. See how not needing to shower is larger now because 2 of us said exactly that. Go and have a to-do. See if you see someone else's comment, hover over it. If you want to reinforce that point, put that up into type your answer here and submit it and see how it grows. Just going to refresh my screen to see what's been happening here. Now, this is a free tool. And as it is a free tool, oh, I love it, guys. There is a little bit of advertising down the bottom. Nothing too serious. But I'm just going to quickly close that ad. Right, let's have one more refresh. You can rewatch to clarify things. I love that. So I'm going to go and just reinforce this. Now, we could be here for the rest of the webinar. This is how much fun this can be. But I'm going to leave you to play in this. I'm going to come back to our slides because I think we can look at a few other things. Thanks so much, guys, for playing. That's really good fun. Sure. Just going to go back to presenting. Yes, Helen, go.
I've just seen Karen's put a question. Can you export the answers from Answer Garden? I see an export button down the
Yes, you can. And when you set it up, Karen, what you do is, I'm actually going to flip over to that screen again. So when you set it up, you set it up with a password. So I have given myself a password to this, and that allows me to go back into admin. In admin is my options where I can export things, but here, even here is a little export button. And if I click on export, I can export the answers into a Wordle, which is a word cloud. I can translate answers. So there's a few different options what you can do with there. You can literally also just go and take a screenshot because it gives you some really cool results from there. Now, I use the admin part here in the back with a password because Helen and Mel and I, we had a bit of a play in there before. We put some answers in there before just to make sure that it really worked. And we wiped those answers because we didn't want to skew anything in there. So it's a really good idea to use this free tool, no account required. But when you set it up, it's this plus button at the top here to set up a new one. You just give yourself a password and add your email address in there, just in case you want to go back and do any changes. But because it's free, if you set one up and you feel like, oh no, that's not what I wanted, you just make another one. It's very simple. Is there any other questions, Helen?
Yes, Barbara's just asked what tools are found really effective for schools who can't physically visit their sites. And I think it'd be really great if lots of people can just add in tools in response to Barbara's question. And maybe we can save that question to the end of your presentation and have a discussion about it. I don't know what you think about that, Monika.
That sounds really good. And I can see Barbara not. So if that's going to be helpful for you, would it be a good idea if we, Mel, if we launch one more, I know we can't do it in a poll. If we, should we do it through the chat? Would that be helpful? Yeah, useful tools connecting with your classes. And I will have quite a few useful tools as part of the presentation as well. Well, I hope they're useful for you. Awesome. All right. So we hit the back channel here. Helen, are we okay to move on? Just want to give me a thumbs up. Awesome. Thanks so much. All right, guys. So we're going to go over to the next slide here. And I want to start talking about tools that are at the next level up in our collaboration scale. Here down here in the bottom, you can see up at the star bit higher up. I'm talking about coordinating and cooperating. Now, I don't know what you guys are like, but you know, when you plan anything, you know, maybe a new program or anything within your team, I like big pieces of paper. I try to draw all over the place. You know, there's usually lots of papers flying around in my space. Maybe there's some of you are like that. It's not that easy when you try to do that while some of you are working from home or all of you are working from home. Or even when you've got a really complex project, you might not be finished in one go. And I tend to run out of space on paper. I don't know if other people do like that. So there's a whole heap of really good brainstorming and planning tools out there. And one of my absolute favorites is Padlet. Some of you will have played in a Padlet with me last year, actually. Now, Padlet is an online sort of notice board, and you can put lots and lots of things in there. Rather than me explain it to you, let's go and have a play. So just like before, Mel put the link into the chat already. You can see the link up on here, or use your phone and scan the QR code, and you will get something that looks like this on your screen. Now, I made this look really pretty because I liked pretty. Well, Padlet likes making things look pretty, and it's very, very simple to do that. So Padlet is like a digital notice board, and you put some sticky notes on there. You can literally just click anywhere to create a new post. I can see somebody has already put a wow, so pretty on there. That wasn't there before. It's really cool. So if you want to add anything to it, double click anywhere on the space and you get a sticky. You can also go down here to that plus button, use the plus button to do that. Same idea. Now you can go and connect posts with the kind of setup I've got here, and you can add files and photos and links and images and heaps of things in there. It's really useful. There are a whole heap of different templates you can use, so you can format the wall, and you can see I put a post here on the side that will show you what that is like. It's a little bit hard to see on the little Google Meet screen. So if you are on the tab yourself, you can just click on that post and it will pop the picture up. So you can have a wall that has brick layouts, you can have a stream, you can have a grid, a shelf, a map, a timeline. And if you are from a historic place, the timeline might appeal to you straight away. Or if you look at different places, maybe the map is something you're really interested in. Now, how would we use this with our learners or with our teams? Why would you use Padlet? I think brainstorming a new program with colleagues, or maybe a new education vision or strategic planning, or how we're going to cope with COVID lockdowns, anything like that could be brainstormed in there. You can be in the same room to do it, or you could do it from home, just being connected through Google Meets like we are right now. You could share resources with colleagues. I know that many years ago, a teacher used this as a space to put all the resources in there that she normally saved in her Facebook account, but she didn't want to open them from her Facebook account in front of her kids. So she stuck them on a Padlet because she knew if she needed the video, it would be right there. Now, if you want to use that with learners, it's a really good place to gather learners' prior knowledge. Find out what they already know, or maybe they can interact with content on there. Like somebody else already said, learners can leave their comments. I love that you guys have got a spaceman doing flips. And I'm just going to scroll down a little bit because this is an endless, this is an endless size canvas. You can go anywhere. You can make it grow as large as you want to. Hallelujah. I'm no longer running out of space on pieces of paper. I can just keep on growing it. So you can share this with people. Really cool tool. It is a free tool, and the free tool only allows you to have 3 of these boards up at any one time. Now, if your organization is not able or doesn't want to invest into the paid version of Padlet, if you have more than one person on the team, you could have 3 in your account and maybe 3 in Mel's account and 3 in Helen's account, and then already there's 9 Padlets you can use. Also, you can just archive those in the end. Take a export the screenshot or what you've got on there and keep them somewhere else, and then you start afresh again. Not many people do actually need to have a whole heap of these Padlets up at all times. So we're going to keep this on the screen here. I'm just going to refresh it to see what happens. Just see if there's anything else that's come up that hasn't shown up yet on my screen. Yes, Helen.
We've got a question here about what format do they archive in? Is that a question that's from BT? Is that about the Padlet? I'm not quite sure what that means. Do you understand that, Monika?
I think I do.
Yeah.
So when you look at the top right here, there's a few different tools that you can use. I'm not going to click remake because remake, if you want to keep the screen, cool, yeah. So if you click on remake, it makes it look different, different background, but I like my space background. If you go to share, this is just to share it with other people so you can get a QR code, which is what I used on the slides earlier for you. You can embed it somewhere, email it. Now down here, you can save it as image, PDF, as a CSV or Excel spreadsheet, and you can straight away print it. So that might be what you were looking for. So that could be really good ways of exporting it. Now, sometimes when you export something as a PDF, it can come out quite small because it wants to sort of make it conform to the PDF format. And the issue, of course, is that your GIFs obviously are not going to come up animated in those, but they will still give you an idea. So it might be a good idea for you to not just write the text in there. Maybe you also want to write the actual URL address of a link that you've got in there, so that if you print it out, you don't rely on clicking on a link, but you actually have the exact letters in there and you can type them back into your browser again. Just to show you the other window behind that, there is the settings, the modify window. Whole heap of things you can do, including giving it a unique address, which can be really good when you work with kids and you want them to get to the address. You want to make it really simple. You can restrict a few of the things like, are people allowed to comment, yes or no? Do you want to filter the content? Do you want to filter it for profanity? Nobody of us would ever use that, so I didn't need to filter that. Lastly, 3 dots over here, there's a few other things that you can do. It's basically what was already included in the other windows, but it's the short version, including archive. So the archiving for you to put that Padlet away and possibly restate it later on. One of my favorite tools, honestly, and I'm lucky I've got one of the old accounts that still allows me to have 80 odd, but I've had a big clear out a little while ago because nobody needs 80 Padlets anymore. If you have 80 Padlets, you've got too many, and that was me. All right, awesome. You can keep on playing on that. You can see, because I own this, I can move things around. Hardware can get you anywhere. Oh, I love this. I don't know if I can move that. It's a bit small, but I can, as the owner of this, you can see I can move it. And you might be able to see too that when I move it, those connections that you made earlier move with it. So I'm just pulling my space man a little bit further down. Good fun, eh? Okay, let's better get back to our different tools. There's a whole heap of other brainstorming tools, and they are at the end of the slides. And Mel has also put links to them on our website. So when you go to our website, tptmt.com, under resources, you find the slides from different webinars, including this one, and some of the links out of there. Let's continue and have a look at really just a quick look at some of the other tools you might find useful. I just collected a few project and team management tools that could be really useful as we're working with some of our teams working from home or different times to us. So Go Roster is something that a lot of hospitality places are using for rostering their staff. They can be really useful. And I know that my colleagues at Waitangi are also using that to complete timesheets. If that is something that's useful to you, go and have a look at Go Roster. Another thing that I know can be really useful, and I use that quite a bit, is Toggle. So Toggle tracks your time or the time of your staff or your colleagues against different projects. Now, many of us are juggling working on site, working from home, maybe have the kids at home, learning at home. And some of us might worry about, are we doing enough work or are we doing too much work? So it's a really good way of tracking what time you're spending. If you spread across a few different projects, that's also a really good way to do it. The free account does heaps. If you really, really want to, you can look into the premium version, but I reckon the free account would work for most of us. Now, lastly, here is a project management tool. It's called Trello. Some people might be familiar with that one. I have not personally used it before, but actually, funnily enough, my adult son has recommended it to me, especially when people are working on a project and not all in the same space all the time. He finds it really good because you can assign tasks to do. You can see what people are up to at the moment, what tasks are already done. So he's Reaspire, again, a free tool to use. Feel free to try it out and tell us all about it. Fantastic. We're going really well for time. Are there any questions? Ah, that's good to know, Phoebe. So it works in Microsoft Teams. That's good because, you know, as Helen just put in the comment there, I mean, we're working from different places on the same projects, and sometimes it's a little bit hard to know, am I doing this? Is somebody else doing this? You know, how far have we gotten? Cool. So that might be us next. Sorry, I don't know what your full name is, BT. Yes, you can really get app fatigue. And I want to get back to that later. Please don't feel completely overwhelmed with all those apps and programs I'm throwing at you. I just want to give you a smorgasbord where you can go like, hey, I think that one looks really interesting. I want to try it out. So I hope these slides are going to be a bit of a resource for you where you can go back and find things again. So a lot of you have talked about virtual experiences, how to connect virtually with your learners when they won't come or can't come to your site at this point in time. And that's what I want to look at in the next part of this webinar. I call them virtual experiences because that's the phrase we use at Waitangi. You might call them virtual explorer, virtual visit, any of these things where you connect with learners through a video screen. So there is a number of common virtual meeting platforms that people tend to use as they connect with kids. For example, Google Meets. That's what we're using right now. Now, when would you use that? If your organization uses Google accounts, it comes with it. Good tool to use. You don't need anything separate. If the virtual class is used to Google Meets, that's a bonus. You don't have to explain it, don't have to take any barriers out. If you want to have a bit of interactivity, you like using those polls or using some of the other things that we are yet to explore, that's a really good platform to use. You know, heaps of schools use Chromebooks nowadays. Works beautifully on Chromebooks. Now, your organization, oh yeah, Debbie has got her hand up. Debbie, do you want to go and ask that now?
Just with Google Meets, if you're not an approved ministry setting, it's like pulling teeth trying to get the equivalent Google Meet, like you've got, you know, with the hand up. It took us probably 3 weeks, maybe even longer, to actually, for somebody to finally say, oh, yeah, okay. And we had to go through getting a letter from our director promising on our heart that there were only 3 of us going to use it, that there was a lot of red tape to jump through. And I actually started to think we were dealing with a robot. But once we got through that, hallelujah, we were finally in. But that's $40 a month.
Yeah, yeah. So that is a really good point you're making, Debbie. And I'm thinking, depending on demand, we might run another tool webinar, how to actually set up some of those. It might not even be me running that, but maybe one of the experts, like I know one of the main people who is in charge of the Google education part for New Zealand and Australia, because he has said to me before that some organizations can actually qualify for the free version that schools are eligible for. That would then cut out the $40 fee per month that you mentioned. So if that's something that people are interested in, please let Mel know, and then we will get that in there. Yep, people are making notes. Awesome. Perfect. Now, I put Microsoft Teams on there next. Now, I know lots of the council organizations are using Office 365 and have Microsoft Teams. And I know when I still worked at Waitangi, we were looking at using Microsoft Teams for our virtual experiences. At this point, we haven't used that there yet, or they haven't used it there. So if you have got Office 365 or Microsoft Teams, that might be a really good tool to use for you. But you need to check with your IT team that you have permission to open your team calls to people beyond your organization. Because ultimately, like I said earlier, it's a tool that's meant to be used within the organization, and they basically have to tick a box to make sure you can share that beyond the organization. It all has to do with Microsoft's real desire to keep your information as safe as possible. Therefore, keep the outsiders out of your organization. You also want to make sure that your virtual class is used to Microsoft Teams. So that would be are really important because you want them to have the easiest experience possible. They, again, have quite a few interactive tools built in nowadays, and that's really good for you and the class because you don't have to jump between different screens and do different things. As you can see, I have jumped out of my screen a few times, and you can already notice that I have not got it back on full screen. You know, it's just the little things sometimes where then kids get distracted. You're like, Miss, why do you have 3 tabs up the top? What is the other tab? That kind of thing. Now, Zoom, of course, is the third very common virtual meeting platform. If your organization uses neither Google Meets nor Microsoft Teams, or if the school you are working with, your virtual class, is used to Zoom, that might be a really good tool for you to use. It's also then a good tool to use if you don't need much interactivity beyond the chat or the breakout rooms, or if you're comfortable to do what I did earlier, jump out to different tabs. And the kids, of course, need to be comfortable with that as well. Now, as we know, we're all listening to Monika. Everybody is muted. It can be quite boring. So what about getting some feedback from your learners? And I know Karen has mentioned Poll Everywhere, which I'm proud to say I introduced her to last year sometime. Poll Everywhere is a really good tool to use if you want to check on your audience participation, get some feedback from them if they're taking something out of there. Now, you don't need to use it when you've got Google Meets and Google Chat or Microsoft Teams and the chat built in there. But if you don't use those and you want a different tool, Poll Everywhere is really good. And as Grace just said, moving between different tabs doesn't always work all that well if you're on Chromebooks or something like that. But you can, again, use that on phones, on iPads. You know, there's different versions of that. You can actually start those activities straight from your slide deck. So you can insert them into your slides. And when that screen comes up, that activity becomes live. And your screen will show you how the participants are interacting with whatever content you put on there. Could be some voting, could be some pins somewhere, word clouds, all sorts of things. However, the participants still need to shift to a different browser tab to complete that, or maybe go on a phone or an iPad. So it doesn't work for everybody, but we've used that before, and I think it helps with interactivity, especially when you're working within Zoom, which hasn't got much built in. Now, Kahoot, I noticed somebody has had that on the chat earlier. I can't remember who it was. Kahoot is lots of fun. In fact, it's lots of hilarity, really noisy. Make sure you mute all the kids. You can do that in your classrooms face-to-face, or you can add this in as a virtual feedback tool. It's really all about being competitive, quizzes, learning games, being faster than the others, coming up with the right answer. So yes, lots of things, yay, or ooh, you know, the kids are right into it. They use it in classrooms often as well. Now, there is a bit of integration with slide decks, but usually you run it from a different browser tab, and they complete it from a different browser tab. Poll Everywhere, the simple version freebie, is free. And it gives you some of the simple reporting features. If you want to get some really elaborate reports, which I don't think many people need, then you can sign up for a monthly or an annual fee. But basically, the free version will take you very far. Same with Kahoot. I've only ever used the free version of Kahoot, and yeah, it fills the purposes that I have found. Now, other tools that you can use for feedback from your learners for interactivity is any of the brainstorming tools that are at the end of the slides, like Padlet, or the back channel tools that we mentioned earlier is also a really good way of getting feedback. All right, I'm just having a quick check in with the chat. Any questions, Mel or Helen? Anything you would like me to address right now?
I think you've just answered the earlier question about student feedback, which is good. Phoebe's asked whether Poll Everywhere is free.
Yeah, there is a free version, and then there's a premium version, and I believe probably the free version is enough for most of us. Karen just put a comment on there about downloading an add-on. And for PowerPoints, there's an add-on, something you need to download. So if you work with a within a council organization, you've got restrictions on what you are allowed to download on your devices. Have a conversation with your IT team, show them why you need it, what difference it makes. And if you present from PowerPoints rather than Google Slides, get them to help you download that onto your devices. For Google, it's very straightforward because it happens straight in the browser.
There's also a question from Debbie.
Yes.
Have you used, what is that? I've never even heard of that. Coggle. I don't even know how to say it.
Yeah. Coggle, yes.
Coggle.
Yeah. Coggle's
very cool for brainstorming and group work. You can use two or three people can link devices and come up with all sorts of brainstorming ideas on a problem or a statement. And it's like a virtual mind map, and it can go for miles, a bit like Padlet in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have got that on my resources list. Coggle is on there, MindMeister's on there, Poplet is on there. There's quite a few on there. There's a whole heap of really cool tools out there. And I've had most success with Coggle with probably intermediate aged kids, because they could make sense of some of the different connections you could make on there. You know, the younger ones, Padlet was a bit easier because you literally just double tap anywhere and it goes there. So yeah, no, definitely Coggle is a really cool one. Awesome. Well, I'm going to move on to the next slide and want to talk a little bit about dedicated platforms for interactive lessons. Now, if you don't want to use the Google Meets, or don't want to use the Teams, or don't want to use Zoom, you want to have something that's really made for kids. There's a couple I've pulled out here. There's one called Peer Deck. The other one is called Nearpod. So Peer Deck is basically adding into Google Slides. So you've got Google Slides, you create them, and then that add-on creates interactivity. So you could have questions, audio, pre-made templates, all sorts of things can go into there. Now you present this to the kids on a dedicated website. So it's not you call them to a Zoom call or Google Meets call. You're taking them to the Peer Deck website, and that's where they enter into the classroom and they interact with the content there. And I'm going to show you what one of those slides looks like just on the next page. Nearpod is a bit more of an online platform where within that platform you bring slides into it or videos, and you add questions, you add images, and you can present that live, or you can have that sit there so that people can go, you know, the kids can work through that in their own pace, which is a little bit, no, it's not quite what we normally do in our context. We normally, you know, direct the kids a bit more in our virtual sessions, I think most of us, but I know that we've discussed it's quite good to provide them with content that they can go through with the teachers. Again, there's a dedicated website to participate in that lesson. So that's a really good solution if you don't want to be in those other spaces, if you want to have it really kids friendly. And an example of a Peer Deck is this here, for example. So if we were in Peer Deck, what you could do is you would have that on your own screen rather than just watching me in the webinar. And you could drag this blue dot here and would go like, I've seen a tool in this webinar, I want to try it. Nah, I don't like any of them. And you can put it over there. Or yeah, maybe put it anywhere on that continuum. So the teacher straight away can see to feedback and can respond to that and can adapt their lesson. If you find that everybody is there, you might go like, okay, let me rethink how I approach this from there. This is not interactive because we're not viewing it in Peer Deck, but it looks really cute. You know, I really like the ideas. I want to play with it a little bit more. So that's what I put together about our virtual experiences. And I think this is just the tools. This is not talking about the pedagogy behind it, how we would put a virtual experience together. But I think it is a really important thing for us to keep in mind. And remember, we were talking about that plethora, about that stepping stone. So we're communicating with the children. We are cooperating and I forgot the other word now. We're definitely cooperating with the kids in there because we have got them interactive in there. So we are going up the steps in the ladder. But I want to go and have a look at some of the tools that are at the highest level of that plethora. There was the creating, where we can go and create things together. Now, that might not be part of a virtual experience with kids. That might be something we do with our colleagues. Or that might be something that we do with kids in our classroom, or we just talk to teachers about it and they do it in their classrooms. But I just put you 4 examples there of things that I find are really cool to do things, create things together. So first one is Canva, and Mel has become quite a specialist at Canva. So we use Canva to design posters and flyers, and you can design presentations. And like many of those online tools nowadays, you can share and collaborate in those things. So, you know, Mel can share it, say, with me, I can hop in at the same time. She moves something around, I move something somewhere else. Can be really annoying if you try to move the same thing at the same time, just saying. Now, Tinkercad is a 3D design tool, and you literally can design anything in there, you know, including spare parts that you 3D print or anything. We have used it in the Raranga Matahiko program extensively. This it's just a really cool tool to try out. Canva is free, the basic version. Tinkercad is free in the basic version. Again, you can share and collaborate on a tool. I'm thinking about a program that you might run in your space, and then the children might use a tool like Tinkercad to represent the learning they've seen. You know, I could imagine it could be a historic item, a Taonga that they've seen in your museum, and they want to create that. Or maybe they want to have a solution to a problem you've shown them as you take them out into the natural environment, and they've seen something like pollution of the rivers, anything like that. I think Jessie actually mentioned Tinkercad in her webinar as well. The last 2 I put on there are some that I haven't heard mentioned so much lately, but I still really like them. Sway is basically a fancy slide deck, really fancy. They call it a digital storytelling and presentation tool. Again, you can share and collaborate, and it links in with your Microsoft accounts. And then Prezi has been around for a really long time. I don't know if anybody still remembers that. I've done job presentations for job applications in Prezi. It basically gives a massive big canvas, and rather than having a slide and a slide and a slide, you are putting a big picture together, and then you go from one place to another, to another, to another. So 4 tools where you can be creative with others. But one that we haven't mentioned yet is one that's built on straight here in our Google Meets, and it's called Jamboard, or it runs as a whiteboard. So if you follow the link that Mel might have or will very soon put into the link, or you use the QR code here, there we go, you can come over to our little whiteboard. Now, I put something up on there that I want you to respond to, if you like. You can respond to whatever you like, but you know, that's my prompt for you for now. Name a tool from this webinar you want to try out at home. Now, how could you respond? You've got a pen here on the left, and you use your mouse to draw, or if you're on a touch screen, you can use your finger or your stylus. There is an eraser. Please be aware you erase not just your own work, you erase anybody's work. You're going over there. Yay, people have found things. You can move things around with the select button, add a sticky note, like people have found images, shapes, text, and I'm going to take the laser pointer. Now, why would you use a Jamboard? To be creative together. We've used it at Waitangi as something where children went on during a virtual experience about the Treaty of Waitangi, and they then tried to design or draw their own tohu, their own marks, just like chiefs signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi with a tohu. And similarly to how the chiefs found it really challenging, not being super used to quilt, some of them, our learners found this quite challenging as well. So when you do this, it's a bit like a Google product in general. You can see up the top right, there's a share button. I've shared this to anyone with a link. What I have learned from working with kids is I usually share this as a view only initially. When it's time for the kids to tutu, yep, I can see somebody's tutuing in the background. I click on the share link, and just like with all Google products, I can go in there and adjust my sharing settings. So I can go and change it to people just being able to view or people being able to edit. I keep it on editing because you guys have way too much fun in there. But that's one of the management tools I use with kids. Canva, Padlet. I love Padlet. Trello, Sway and Prezi look good. Yeah, sometimes I forget the cool tools that are out there, and I definitely want to try out Peer Deck as well. Awesome. You guys are fabulous. Now we're getting to the end of our time, so I'm just quickly gonna jump back over to the Grace. Thank you. We will keep this in mind why this is not working, and see if we can get some more information to you how you could fix that. All right, I'm just quickly coming back to my slides here because we've got 5 minutes. Our motto is start on time, finish on time. So some of you will go like, oh my gosh, there's a million tools in there. It's like, I don't even want to know anymore. I've seen too many. So I really want you to think about where to start. Think about what you're aiming for, what level of collaboration you want. Do you want communication, cooperation? Do you want to be creative together? Do you want to be synchronous or asynchronous working together? And what tools are available within your organization or between the people you're working with? And what tools are you familiar with? Now, when you introduce a tool, never just do it for the sake of the tool. You want to really have a purpose for using it. It needs to be helpful. If it's not helpful, drop it. Don't use a tool if it's not working for you. Feel free to feel free to replace it. Try something else or try again later. Just because it doesn't work right now, it doesn't mean it's not going to work at another time. So that's why we keep those slides up there too. If it doesn't work for you right now, maybe in some other time, you might want to come back to them. Don't know if there's any more questions. We've got about 3 minutes before we finish. Helen, is there any questions?
I think it's been really great having so many comments and questions. The chat's been very active in this webinar, so thank you everyone for your participation. I think Barbara's question about, which was to everybody, about what tools they've found useful for schools. We've had quite a few replies to that in the chat. We've had Zoom, Google Slides, short videos, Google Meets, Coggle and Poll everywhere. So that might be something that you want to pick up on as a sort of roundup chat for the end.
Great, yeah. So it's a really good idea to have a conversation with the school you're connecting with. What are they using to connect with their learners when they're learning from home? Because that's a platform the kids already know. Now, if they will most likely say Google Meets, or they will say Microsoft Teams, or they will say Zoom, that's usually the 3 big ones that you get from them. And then it's a matter of checking with the people who run your IT systems, if you're in a large organization with restrictions, and check with them which ones of those are available to you. Now, if you've got a choice from the school, there's nothing wrong with saying, well, I prefer the one over the other, because you need to be familiar with that as well. And it's, it's new for a lot of us. Not a lot of people have worked in this kind of space before. Start with one. Just start with one thing for now, and if it is doing a Google Meet presentation for the class, even just talking to them on the screen, and maybe you have got some Taonga that you can show to them at the same time, or a space in your exhibition that you can show them. I'm thinking, Barbara, of you particularly at Pioneer Village, there might be certain spaces you can show them. When we show things, we've done a few webinars before where people talked about using phones, putting it on Zoom on phones, and they talked about using gimbals, which is basically like a fancy selfie stick kind of idea. So we will pull some of those resources together as well. And Mel, between you and I, hey, we'll find some of those other webinars and maybe add the links to those to the link list below my webinar, so that you can have them all in one place and have a look at how people do that. Is there anything else that we should respond to right now? I'm really aware it's 4:29. There I was talking about starting on time, finishing on time.
Yeah, we do. We do need to try and stick to our time. We pride ourselves on our timekeeping. I think it's been really valuable, and you can tell it has just from the amount of chat that's come up and the questions and comments. And I think what's great about it is that there's a discussion now across the sector that's starting, where people are responding to each other and starting to share ideas, which is what we wanted. from these webinars. So that's really great to see. I think you've definitely achieved the aims of this session. And I think a few people might be feeling a bit mind blown by how many tools you've covered in such a short space of time. And I know I was when you first told me what you were going to talk about. But as we've said, it's all recorded and the slides are on our website. So if you're feeling a bit bamboozled, just take a cup of tea, go back and look at the recording tomorrow or in another couple of days and take it at your own pace, and you might revisit some of these things and have a play with some of the tools. So thank you, Monika. It's been really good.
Awesome. Thank you.
So we've got just before we do our closing karakia and say goodbye, we just want to let you know about our next few webinars coming up. So in 2 weeks' time, we've got Alison Willard, who works at Experience Wellington. She's going to be demystifying local curriculum for those of you who might need a bit of a reminder about what local curriculum is, or might be thinking about local curriculum in terms of the new focus on enriching local curriculum from the ministry. Alison's going to be doing a half-an-hour webinar on that in a couple of weeks' time. And then after that, on the 18th of November, we have got the wonderful educators from Gubbett Brewster and Pukeariki talking about how they developed the 360 degrees virtual tour of the Brett Graham exhibition and the associated education activity, online education activity. And then on the 25th of November, we've got two of our wonderful national museums talking about ways of adapting programs for online learning. We've got the National Maritime Museum and the National Army Museum, who will be discussing some programs they've adapted just recently due to COVID, and there'll be time to discuss what they've done. And if anyone else wants to share something that they've been trying or doing at their workplace, please get in touch with us. We want this to be a platform for the sector to share. So looking forward to those webinars. And yeah, I think it's time to close now. Thank you, Monika. Unuhia, unuhia. Unuhia ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua i te ara takatā. Koia rā e rongo, whakarerea e ake ki runga, kia tina, tina, huie, tai kie. Thank you, everybody. Great to see you. Hopefully see you in another couple of weeks' time.